So this video is about the MGDDA document. If you've been charged with drink driving but you've never seen one of these before, you may have a defence without knowing. Now, MGDDA stands for Manual Guidance for Drink Drive Pro Forma A, and it's a 20 to 25 page document that the police would normally have to fill out in the breath test room with you whenever a sample of breath is taken from somebody in police custody. It's a nationally approved police issued style pro forma. Every police station should have them, and it's designed to guide the police officer through the procedure when taking a sample of breath. Now you might think, well, how hard can it be to take a sample of breath? You blow twice into the breath machine. But for various reasons, including human rights laws, there's lots of other information the police have to give you. There's questions they've got to ask you, and there's legal requirements and warnings that they have to give. And all those legal requirements, questions, warnings are all contained within this document. So you should remember the police officer going through this document in the breath test room with you before they took that sample. Now you might think, well, I don't remember the police going through any 25-page document. I don't remember the police asking me any questions. And the concern there is that it may not have happened. Now, if you've been charged with drink driving and the police didn't go through this document, and that may well be because they wanted to get you on the machine as quickly as possible, maybe they wanted to get the highest breath reading, perhaps the police officer didn't realise that the document should have been filled out and the information contained within it has to be given to you by law. If the officer hasn't realised that and therefore he's not done it, whatever the reason, if you've given a sample of breath and the police are now using that breath reading to prosecute you, you shouldn't be convicted if this document wasn't completed correctly and you weren't given the information contained within it. Now, going through the MGDDA document really quickly, there's a section on the front page where the officer will take your details, your name, address, date of birth. He may put some information down there about any roadside breath reading if there was one, and he'll also note your demeanour. And you'll sometimes see the suspect is calm and compliant, or the suspect's eyes are glazed, his speech slurred. It doesn't really matter how you appear in a drink driving case and whether you are impaired, because in a section 5.1a case of drink driving, and that's your standard drink driving charge, remember the police don't need to prove that you were impaired. They only need to prove that you were above a legal limit, even if you weren't displaying any signs of intoxication or impairment. Now, at A7 in the MGDDA, the officer will tell you what you're under investigation for. And it could be that you've driven a vehicle whilst over the legal limit. It may be that you've been in charge of the vehicle. It could be a Section 4 offence of driving whilst unfit. And as you continue through the document, then at A8, you'll start to hit the various questions that the police have to ask you. Now think back. Do you remember the police going through a long list of questions? This would normally happen in the breath test room. Occasionally can happen at the front desk, but that's not to be mistaken with the checking in procedure when you're asked questions about your mental health and when they'll do an identification check at the front desk as well. So have they gone through these questions with you? This relates to the reliability of the result as well, and about any consumption before driving and any consumption after driving as well. So think back, do you remember that? The most important part of the MGDDA document is at A12, and this is what's going to make the difference in a drink driving case. This is what's called a statutory warning, or the legal requirement. And this is where the officer has to explain to you that you don't have to give a sample of breath if you don't want to. And the reason nobody can force you to give a sample of breath is because you can't be forced to incriminate yourself. It doesn't matter what the allegation is, what the offence is the police are investigating. By law, everyone has the right not to self-incriminate. It's for the same reason that if you're ever interviewed by the police, you can say no comment in the interview. And the reason you can say no comment is because you don't have to give the police any evidence that might get you into more trouble or that might risk incriminating you, evidence they can use against you in court proceedings. And the same applies in a drink driving case in the breath test room. You don't have to give evidence which might lead to a prosecution, and that includes a breath reading, despite you being there for that reason, despite the police asking you to provide that specimen. So the officer has to explain what would happen if you didn't give a sample of breath and what the consequences of that would be. Also really important to check whether they explained that properly. So you might remember the police officer making out that it'd be worse if you didn't give a sample, and they'll sometimes say it's an instant ban, or you'll be held here for longer, you'll be taken straight to court. Maybe the officer said there's a risk of prison if you don't give a sample, and that's not correct. That's not quite right. So they've got to stick to the pro forma, and they've got to explain it in the right way. Now the best way to check is with CCTV. Most of what happened in the breath test room is on camera, whether it's CCTV in the corner of the room or whether it's body-worn video. And we can normally access that footage. Now, I really wouldn't want any client that has concerns about the procedure in their drink driving case just rolling over and pleading guilty before we've had the chance to look at the evidence. Because if the evidence tells us something different about the case, if the evidence, for example, shows that the procedure was incorrect, and maybe you weren't given the right information, then by law you shouldn't be convicted of the offence and you shouldn't therefore lose your licence. Don't worry about the breath reading. because this procedure has to be carried out regardless of the breath reading. Don't worry about previous convictions. Again, the procedure has to be correct. And don't worry about any admissions that you might have made to the police. Sometimes people will say to me, well, look, Conor, I told the police officer that I was guilty. I pleaded guilty at the police station. And that's not really something that you can do in police custody. Even if you told the officer you were guilty and you somehow admitted to that, procedure's still got to be correct. So did the officer explain the consequences of not providing that specimen? Was that made clear to you? Now, if you agree to provide that specimen, and most people will give a sample when they're asked to at the police station, the officer will then take a note further on in the MGDDA of the breath readings and the time at which those breath readings were taken. If you don't provide a sample, there may be some more questions the officer has to ask you, and again, further legal requirements that he has to give. But like I say, most people do as they're told. They comply and they provide those evidential samples. And then moving on through the MGDDA document, and like I'm doing now, you should remember the police officer flicking through the pages, because this is an MGDDA document. It's the same as what the police officer would have with him in the breath test room. There's also a section on the form where you attach the printout. The printout looks a bit like a till receipt. That's also really important data and information on the printout. It's not something I'm going to get into in this video, but if you've got a printout, you've been charged with drink driving and you want to understand more about the information contained on the printout, including those calibration checks and those blank checks, and also what your breath reading means and how that might change the case or change any defences or change the sentence, just get in touch. All our initial advice is always free of charge, so happy to discuss the printout. And actually there's a useful feature on our website where you can send us a copy of your printout and we can look at that before we call you back. Now, continuing through the MGDDA, the final section is where the officer signs the document. Now, think back how many police officers were in the breath test room with you. It's going to be one or two. There's no requirement for there to be more than one, but sometimes there's an officer that will complete the procedure. He'll sign the document and mark his name with a C to indicate that he completed it. The date of the signature needs to go down on there, and there might be a witnessing officer as well, so somebody who's stood there probably silently and just witnessed the procedure. Their name still needs to go down and they can mark a W for witness. So we can check the MGDDA, we can check whether any mistakes have been made. There may be CCTV that we can access as well. Now, a common question is, well, can I get this before the first court date? And that's largely up to the prosecution. We have very little control over what the prosecution or how much evidence they choose to serve prior to a court date, but you can normally access it, and the initial evidence made available before the court date may include a copy of the MGDDA document anyway, even if we haven't asked for it. If it's not there when we get to court, we can always ask the prosecutor if there's a copy on their system, and even if it hasn't been served previously, it could be handed to us on the court date. And again, that's really useful information, because we'll be expected to enter a plea on the court date as well of guilty or not guilty. So if you have got some concerns as to whether the police officer went through the MGDDA document with you, if you don't recall certain questions being asked or you weren't given certain legal information that you think you should have been given, then make sure you get in touch. Happy to talk you through the MGDDA procedure in a bit more detail. Happy to discuss your case with you. If you go on our website, you can request a call back. You can put your contact details in there, and I'd usually call you back to discuss the case. And again, all our initial advice is completely free of charge.